Last week, the inaugural Denver Summit home soccer game drew the largest crowd in the history of American women's professional sports. More than 60,000 fans came to the Broncos Stadium, the Denver Broncos football stadium, to watch their inaugural game against the Washington Spirit, my own hometown Washington Spirit. Now, Denver Summit FC are building a new stadium in downtown Denver, and it's only the second stadium built specifically for women's soccer in the U.S. The $225 million project will bring a 14,000-seat stadium to Santa Fe Yards. Bree is going to tell us what Santa Fe Yards is in a minute. And if the early enthusiasm for the summit is any indication, this is going to be a great day out for Denverites for many years to come. Bree Davies, host of CityCast Denver, welcome to Your City Could Be Better.
What's up, David? Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's so good to be here. You did not make it to the summit game, but it sounds like it was the event of the day in Denver.
63,000 people to be exact. And I will just say I was out in the burbs that day. My son has a class that he goes to called Ninja Zone, but we went to lunch after that. And the whole restaurant was full of people, particularly kids and like teenage girls in head to toe summit gear. So we're already we're in. We're fully in.
And it's just their first game. So this is a new team.
This is their first home game.
It's not like they're the champions or everyone has heard of them before. It's just getting started.
Literally the first time they've made an official appearance here. So
okay, so we're going to talk about Denver investing in big time women's sports in a way that no city or only Kansas City, I guess, of other cities has done. But you are a city that in general has invested in downtown sports. I was really struck last time I was in Denver about how close all your stadiums are to downtown. I think your arena and your football stadium and your baseball stadium are all really in the heart of the city. So is big time sports good for Denver so far?
Loaded question, I would say. Good for who, right? I mean, it brings business to surrounding businesses. It's definitely helped our downtown, which has struggled for a long time. But the area around Coors Field, which is one of those stadiums, does quite well during the season. I think, is it good for the billionaires that own these teams? Absolutely. I think the question has become, is it affordable to working class fans, especially when I think about the Denver Broncos, which is really the root of our team spirit. There is working class folks in Denver. So, I mean, the fact that we have two more stadiums, not just the women's stadium, but we're getting a new Broncos stadium coming to the center of the city in the next few years is really interesting because that will reshape the city as well. But I would just say in general, obviously, Denver loves sports and loves this. And I think it's a big question to say, I don't know, is it good for the city? But I think a lot of people would say absolutely.
Okay. And maybe it's different when it's a women's sports team. Maybe it's different when it's the kind of stadium they're going to build. We'll get to that. But you already have a men's professional soccer team in Denver, the Colorado Rapids, who I once watched lose to the Washington, to DC United in an MLS final. Just want to note that. Saw the Rapids lose. Sorry, guys. This was 30 years ago. But you already have a team and they already have a stadium. So why do you need to build another purpose-built soccer stadium?
Glad you asked this question because the Denver posted this 4-part series last year that I'd love to share a link in the show notes for listeners, looking at the economics of sports stadiums. And it's really up in the air if they're really worth it. But the park you're talking about in particular, Dick's Sporting Goods Park, is actually in Commerce City, which is part of the metro area, but it's not in Denver proper. And Denver loves to have these stadiums in Denver proper. And I think there was a point with this coming soccer stadium where the owners were getting a lot of pushback from city council here, and they actually threatened to take the stadium somewhere else. Same with the Broncos Stadium, the soon-to-be-built new Broncos Stadium. There was a lot of conversation about maybe it'll move out of downtown proper. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to taking it outside of the city if you're talking about purely about space, and people went nuts. So I think part of it is Denver just wants its own stadium for this particular sport. And there's obviously incentives involved from the city, taxpayer dollars and stuff like that. But I think Denver just wanted it in Denver.
So the Summit, this NWSL team, are going to play 15 home games at the stadium in a regular season. They may have playoff games. There may be some other exhibition games, some other games that are scheduled, but it's not a huge number. It's not like a baseball stadium. Is it worth all the effort? Is it worth the spending that's going to happen just for that number of games?
That's a good question. I think the thing that they were really selling it on, which is the other uses for the stadium, it's really been promoted as an entertainment center, a space where other things will be happening. Again, it's being proposed as a catalytic development for the surrounding area. I would say something, too, about the Dick's Sporting Goods Park we were just talking about in Commerce City. That has 600,000 square feet of space that never saw the promises realized of this other development. And so a lot of that hangs around these sports stadiums conversations. But I would just say, from my perspective, as a person that's involved in the music scene, we are a huge concert city. We are a huge outdoor concert city. Of course, we have Red Rocks, 9,000. That's a 9,000 seat venue. This is a 14,000 seat venue. These room caps, these sizes really matter to promoters. We have two huge promoters here in Denver that do the majority of concerts, AEG and Live Nation. If one of them got the contract for this particular stadium, they would have no trouble booking it the rest of the year. So I think that's a big part they're banking on. Other stuff.
Other events in the stadium itself. What else is going around the stadium? So they're going to build a stadium, but I'm sure there will be other things.
Sure. They've promised housing, which is always something that comes along with these conversations. They've promised retail. They've promised a lot of things. But again, looking at the Dick's Sporting Goods Park project, literally none of that happened. There are roads to nowhere that surround Dick's Sporting Goods Park. So I think that was a fear for people. But we're also talking about a plot of land that is right in the middle of the city. There's already development around it. I mean, it's literally in the middle of our city, and it's been sitting vacant for decades. So it's a lot of big promises of this idea of the entertainment district, which has taken over, I think, with the stadium conversation in the last few decades, is the other things that can go along with a stadium, not just being surrounded by parking lots, which is what our current Broncos stadium the problem is.
And to your point, like it is a big difference when you're talking about something that's in the downtown of a city versus in the suburbs. In my city, all of the suburban big sports ventures that have ever been built, the big venues that have been built, have been dead zones because they put acres and acres and acres of parking around it.
Yes.
Like that's all that's there, and there's no reason to be there except the sporting event or maybe the concert, and they die, or they are dead. They're dead when they're not being used.
Yeah.
But for downtown sports venues that are relatively dense and that are relatively close to other things and which don't have tons of parking, those tend to really develop alternative uses. Like people do put restaurants and breweries and other things next to them.
Yeah, and that's the case with Coors Field, our baseball field, which, again, attendance is high, even though our team sucks, because people love to hang out at Coors Field. Like, it has great offerings when it comes to, like, beer and drinks and great places to sit and hang out in the sun. But that's a unique case in that it was built into a downtown area that already existed. We have another great example of the potential for things other than parking lots happening in Denver Center as well with Ball Arena, which is owned by Stan Kroenke. He owns a lot of stuff. We're calling this Kroenkeville. He's got this huge plan to actually turn those existing parking lots around Ball Arena where the Nuggets play and the Avalanche play into a whole new neighborhood. Housing, they're promising childcare, grocery stores, post offices. Like they're actually, again, all of this is promises. You can't make a lot of those things just happen out of thin air. But that is something that I think a lot of these folks are thinking about going on forward in the future. And that one hasn't been realized yet either. So it's really kind of a wait and see. But that's the hope. And I think for a lot of Denverites, that's the hope too, because what does a giant empty parking lot serve us in the middle of the city if you're not going to that event? Not much.
Last time I was in Denver, I stayed in a hotel. My room looked over Coors Field.
Yeah. Which is cool,
amazing.
Right? I mean,
it was
do
really
you feel
cool.
like,
yeah.
That's for like someone visiting here. Is that a bonus to you? Like, do you?
Well, I hate baseball, so not for me, but I do like sports. So it was kind of given one hand, taken the other. Who has been the driving force to build this women's soccer stadium? And did they have to overcome opposition to do it?
So there's a couple things at play here. We can talk about the land portion in a minute, but I think Peyton Manning is one of the owners. I wouldn't say that registered much at all with folks. The
Did
mayor
with
has been
me. It was in my notes.
It did. I mean, I think it does for name recognition, but he didn't come up that much. He wasn't really like the face, for instance. Our mayor, Mike Johnston, has been a huge booster of this. Like, wearing the jerseys everywhere. Like, he's really been a booster for it. And I think that he helped sell it quite a bit. But at the center of this all is a gentleman named Rob Cohen. And he's the primary owner of the Denver Summit Football Club. And he is also, I just want to say, hey, Rob Cohen, if you're listening, we've tried to get you on the podcast. We would love to still have you on. But he's been behind a lot of different projects sort of similar to this. So he was the head of Colorado's 2018 Exploratory Committee for Denver to host the Winter Olympics, a bid that we lost to Salt Lake City. He also advised bidders on the Broncos before the Walton Penner Group bought it, and that would have made him a partner in that ownership. He was part of the effort to bring a WNBA team here, which did not happen. He's a financial guy that's lived here since the 80s. So I think he is kind of the guy at the center of it all that's been pushing this forward. But what's interesting to me is he was so keen on the Olympics. Historically, Denver has said no to the Olympics. We won a bid for the 1976 Olympics. That bid actually went to the voters over if we wanted to spend money to build the facilities. And Denver said, no, we are the only city in the history of the Olympics to say no to it. So I think Rob Cohen has taken some big gambles on bringing different types of sports here. And I think it's a combination of his persistence, the right mayor, and the right atmosphere and time. 63,000 people showed up. People want this.
Do you think if there were no men's professional soccer team and there was a proposal to they brought a new men's professional soccer team to Denver and they wanted to build a stadium downtown, there would be as much enthusiasm? Do you think that women's soccer is having a moment that makes it cool and desirable and like it's this whole new fandom of girls and young women who have been engaged by the sport?
I think that is a huge part of it. I don't know if a men's soccer team would have been as big of a sell, but again, the folks showing up for this first inaugural game in the tens of thousands is really a testament to the culture of that here. And yeah, it was, like I said, I'm at a restaurant. It's all young girls wearing Summit gear. The time is right. And I think that's what they were really banking on. And sometimes, it's like he was looking at pushing for a WNBA team, not a couple years ago, not that long ago. That didn't make it. We weren't there yet. For some reason, I think this just was the right time, and there was enough folks interested in it to see a women's soccer team. And I was surprised a little bit, but also Denver can be on the forefront of things sometimes when we don't even realize that we're leading.
Was there a competing plan for Santa Fe Yards? And what is Santa Fe Yards?
That's a great question. What is Santa Fe Yards? A name they made up for an old brown field that used to be a rubber factory, Gates Rubber Factory, to be exact. So that the first time I ever saw that name was in reporting about it that sort of inferred that we were supposed to know that was a real place. And so folks were like, what? And we are very, like many cities, we're very touchy when developers want to rename our neighborhoods. But this particular part of Denver has literally been, it was a factory. It was closed. When did it? 1995. So for perspective, it closed when I was 15. I'm 45. So that was an abandoned building, a series of abandoned buildings for a long time. And then it was a field. There was some promise for development, I think, in the early, like 2001-ish. And it was never fully realized. Some development happened, but on some of the parcels of land, but there was just this huge empty field forever. And again, it needed to be remediated because it was an old factory. But around 2014, developers came in and said, we're going to do it. And guess what they built? A bridge that goes nowhere. It's called the Bridge to Nowhere. So this is an empty field with a bridge. I think they ran out of money. Something fell through. It never happened. And ever since then, again, this is in the middle of the city. People have been dying for anything to go in there. So truthfully, there was not a hard sell on where it would go. People were really excited about that aspect, actually.
One thing that struck me about Denver, again, last time I visited, is that you have all kinds of wonderful former industrial space that's been repurposed into new urban life, into apartments, into breweries. Mostly it seems to be breweries. or apartments. But in this case, you have a rubber factory. Why do you think Denver is good at repurposing its industrial decay into something that people want for a 21st century city?
I am so glad you asked this because this is really a point of contention for us, especially those of us that have been here for a very long time. And it really depends on who you ask. In the 60s, Denver itself voted to demolish an entire Latino neighborhood under the guise of urban renewal right in central Denver. It's actually where my alma mater, Metro State, exists now. This was its own neighborhood, formerly its own city, Auraria. And the damage that was done to that community is still being felt today. There's displaced Aurarians throughout Denver. And then a few years after that, this urban renewal push crushed our downtown. We lost 27 blocks of historic buildings that were mostly replaced with parking lots. And the infill in the last 10 to 20 years, luckily, has filled in a lot of those parking lots. But how we view what is important here can be really tough. And I think the other thing is, in more recent years, there's been a displacement of artists from some of these areas that have become very popular, those warehouse spaces that were once cheap and things like that. But that's the historical and it's one perspective. I want to be fair. This is one perspective that I have. But I think part of it is Denver is always reinventing itself. I think we're always kind of trying to find our identity. We're not really good at looking at ourselves and being like, we're actually pretty cool. But that also can have a plus side, which means there's parts of the city that developers see as an opportunity. Also, the land was probably a lot cheaper 10 to 20 years ago here than it was in other cities of our size.
I do think that the story of artists move in to cheap, decrepit housing or cheap, decrepit warehouses or whatever, and then they gentrify it because people want to be around artists and they do cool stuff, and then artists get priced out. That is the story of American cities. Like, that's what you want that to happen.
I mean, I don't, to be honest with you. I lived through it. I mean, what happened in Denver in particular was there was the Ghost Ship fire in Oakland where 36 people died in a DIY space. But what happened was the reaction across the country was cities then started cracking down on some of these quote unquote DIY spaces for being fire code violations and zoning code violations. And it pushed a lot of artists out. And to be fair, this was already happening a little bit, but we have an area called the Rhino Art District, which is where much of this displacement happened. And many folks would argue that it isn't necessarily better off as an art district when artists can't necessarily afford to be there. So I don't know. I would challenge that. I would challenge that perception and say it isn't always good because, sure, people want to be near artists, but also I want to be in a city where artists can afford to live and do weird stuff that becomes mainstream. We have Meow Wolf. We have the first Meow Wolf outside of Santa Fe for a reason. Our DIY community was very strong here and very connected to them.
Right. No, for sure. And I'm not saying having artists in a city is bad. We've gotten far away from our topic. I'm not saying that having artists in a city is bad or that I'm just saying that this is the story of urban succession. And then what happens is the people who would be artists in Denver are now going to be artists in Cheyenne or Laramie or something.
Or in here, they've moved to the San Luis Valley,
yes,
which is where a lot of artists have moved themselves. But I think they, like any other population, still want to be able to be in the city. And so it's a very touchy subject for folks. And it's a much more nuanced topic than I think we have time to tackle today.
I'm glad to get on it. And it does connect indirectly to, you build sports stadiums to serve huge populations of people with money who want to come pay for fancy professional sports. I wonder, with this, finally, to go back to the Summit Stadium, how much of this is the city funding a stadium and how much of it is private developers putting their own dime behind it?
Sure. Again, great question, because this was a point of contention for folks. Denver, like many places, has struggled with affordable housing. And when the city wants to put up money towards something that's not necessarily necessary, like you said, there's existing stadiums here. It can be a hard sell. So Denver itself so far has put $70 million towards purchasing the land under the stadium. We will own the land under the stadium. And then some of that money will also go to infrastructure improvements to the surrounding area. And again, another criticism of this was do we have to get a stadium to get infrastructure improvements? Like, we still need sidewalks. We still need roads. Some of this neighborhood has been disconnected to other close neighborhoods because of highway expansion and stuff. So it wasn't without contention. And it was a conversation city council had for a long time and delayed the vote a couple times before that money was approved. So Denver in total so far, 70 million, which means about, I think, 150 to 200 million from the private developers and the ownership group.
So Bree, what can listeners, your city could be better listeners, and other cities take away from this conversation about the Denver Summit Stadium that could make their city better?
Sure. I don't want to rain on the parade. I think it's incredible. Again, the attendance was amazing. It's an incredible feat, especially for women's soccer. But I guess I would just say, though, is you have a choice more than you think you do. Our cities don't make these decisions on their own. So public input is important. Again, we said no to the Olympics. Like, the Olympics literally went to the ballot, right? This is more of this city council who represents us, the citizens, made these decisions. But again, it was not without delaying these votes so that there could be more conversation around it. Because I think that was one of the struggles for people, was it felt like it came on really fast. Like, where is this coming from? And our mayor loves this kind of stuff. He has been on board with this stadium, with the Broncos stadium. Like, I mean, mayors are looking like any other politician to create a legacy, and he was a big booster of it. But yes, the voters were represented through city council's actions. And so I guess I would just I hope folks take away that civic engagement matters, even when it comes to things where it's like, do we get a say in this? Do we get to say if we have this kind of a stadium? You absolutely do. And I think it's important that the public's voice is a part of that conversation. But yeah, it was, it kind of surprised me, to be honest with you, but in a good way, that we were ready for this.
Let's go to our word on the street segment, our second topic, which actually just dovetails perfectly into what you were just talking about, which is I want to talk about what happens when you have an exciting mayor. So I come from a city, Washington, D.C., that has a really boring mayor. She is really aggressively boring, and she's leaving after 3 terms. Probably she will not have another job in politics because there's nowhere to go in Washington. She's been incredibly effective. Really great mayor, in my view. But you in Denver have a telegenic, extremely ambitious, handsome mayor, Mike Johnston, who obviously longs to be a senator or governor or probably president. And so I guess my question to you is, all things being equal, is it good to have an egomaniacal, ambitious mayor because they will get things done so that they can be nationally celebrated? Or is it bad because they're always doing flashy things to become nationally celebrated rather than doing the boring work of, like, getting potholes filled up?
Well, let me give you a little context. He is the first mayor after a 3-term, 12-year mayor that outgoing at that time was maybe not the most popular. He was, especially I think for folks on the far left side of the spectrum, the way that he handled homelessness and such was very unpopular. But that being said, we had 12 years of the same person. We had 17 people run for mayor. And CityCast Denver attempted to interview all of them. We got 14 of them on the mic, including Mike Johnston. And I think it's both. I've interviewed him many times. He comes on our show very often. He is the charisma you see on TV or on Instagram. It's even more in person. You fall for it immediately. He's got the thing that politicians really, really want to have, which is this likability. But part of the struggle is he does make big decisions. And a lot of times city council says this has been a big criticism of city council. They're like, we don't hear about stuff until the mayor's decided it. They feel like there's not a lot of transparency in the decisions that he makes. He does seem to have the sort of Silicon Valley move fast, break things kind of behavior. And I would say it's good and bad. I'm not a huge fan of spending a ton of money on 2 brand new stadiums when we have these other perfectly functional stadiums. But at the same time, we have opportunities that clearly Denverites want. So I think while he's on the pulse of what a lot of Denverites want, he's also been highly criticized for this big show, quick moving. And I don't know if it necessarily, to get back to your question, I don't know. Part of me would love to have your mayor, honestly. I would love to have somebody I don't know that much about that's actually just like head down doing stuff. But at the same time, I love that we have a mayor that can speak to our personality and who we are. I mean, this man went to Washington to defend our right to be a sanctuary city. That's something that we're very proud of. So I think it works both ways. And I think the ideal person would be a little bit of both, but you kind of can't have a little bit of both. So we got Mike Johnston.
Bree Davies, host of CityCast Denver. Thanks for coming on Your City Could Be Better. Listen to Bree every weekday on CityCast Denver.
Thank you, David. This was fun.
That's all for today's episode of Your City Could Be Better. I'm your host, David Plotz. Our producers this week were Lizzie Goldsmith, Elizabeth Kama, Priyanka Tilve, Bree Davies, and Paul Caroli. Our music is by Carl Christensen. If you are enjoying the show, why not tell your friends, rate the show, or leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Either way, we'll be back next week with another conversation about how your city could be better.